Good morning. I'm going to proceed to call up our very special panel this morning, and as they do, I will introduce them. Joanne Epps is Executive Vice President and Provost of Temple University. As Temple's Chief Academic Officer, she oversees all academic policies and activities of the university. She served as the Dean of the Law School at Temple for 8 years prior to her appointment as Provost in 2016. Anybody who knows her as a passionate advocate for educational access and affordability. And she's been widely recognized with academic and community circles as a champion of the advancement of women and minorities in legal education and as an innovator in experiential learning. She's also been an active leader in the Philadelphia community, serving on the city's Board of Ethics, and is a longtime member of the Defender Association of Philadelphia. Wendell Pritchett is Provost and Presidential Professor of Law at Education at the University of Pennsylvania, a celebrated teacher and scholar of urban policy, education, civil rights, race relations, as well as an accomplished leader and administrator. Pritchett was a professor at Penn Law for 8 years before answering the call to serve as Chancellor at Rutgers-Camden in 2009. He returned to Penn in 2014 and served as interim Dean of the Law School before being named Provost in 2017. He's the author of 2 books, Robert Clifton Weaver and the American City in 2008, and Brownsville, Brooklyn, Blacks, Jews, and the Changing Face of the Ghetto in 2002, and I found out yesterday he's a former CUMU president. Michael Palis currently serves as Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor of Rutgers University-Camden, which he joined in 1996 as founding chair of the Department of Computer Science. Before becoming Provost in 2015, he served as Associate Dean. Before joining Rutgers, Dr. Palis served on the faculties of the University of Pennsylvania and the New Jersey Institute of Technology, an internationally recognized scholar of algorithms and parallel and distributed computing. He is a senior member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers and fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Please join me in welcoming our panel. Good morning.
Good morning.
I shouldn't start off by mentioning that Dr. Brian Blake, who's the provost, was supposed to join us this morning. He has been the provost of Drexel University and was recently announced as provost of George Washington University, and we're told he's literally on the move, which anybody who knows him knows he's always on the move. So it's we really wish him well, and I know miss him this morning because. Before we get into the individual universities, I'll mention, one of the things I was hearing from Joanne earlier was sort of missing Brian, that the 4 of you have actually had a number of opportunities to collaborate and, didn't miss the happening of sort of history here that in the 4 CUMU universities and colleges here in this area, the provosts at one point have been all people of color, and as we're sort of talking about sort of the colleges and universities, often the core areas seen in our program has been the issue of diversity. So maybe start off by talking about a little bit about yourselves and your roles, and also the relationship with each other's, and then perhaps dig into, when we talk about the academic leadership and the urban mission, what that means in each of your institutions. Joanne?
Thank you very much. It's an interesting situation to think of the 4 of us holding the position of provost, a job that most people in America don't actually know what it is. I think most students and faculty are saying, what actually do you do? But it was a wonderful opportunity for the 4 of us to quickly come together and to recognize that we are the anchor institutions at this city, and it has been a real pleasure to be a part of this foursome, and I will miss Brian's presence, is that it made an easy way for us to come together. We just said, hey, we should have breakfast. But it also, I think, reflected the role modeling that our institutions are doing by having appointed us to these positions. They're saying, both in terms of diversity and commitment to community and role modeling for the young people that are growing up in this city, that there are jobs that you can hold where you have a seat at the table, and you can therefore influence what the institution will do. And I'll end by just saying that one of the wonderful things that we are doing together, and I know that my colleagues here will talk a little bit more about it, our 4 institutions have come together to sponsor an international conference next year called Law, Education, and Public Health. It is an international community, and it comes to the United States very rarely, and it's looking for public health solutions to law enforcement problems. And one of the things that the 4 of us did was say, we should do this. This is important for our city. It is important for the 4 institutions to step up. So we are the lead sponsors together. And I am really excited about that. And as I said to Wendell and to Michael and to Brian at the time, this happens to be law, education, and public health. I hope that the next time it'll be something else. There's nothing about that topic. It was the unity of our 4 institutions that was the exciting part for me. So I'm delighted to be here this morning and have a chance to talk a little bit about being a part of a city that's got as much of a commitment to the community as our institutions do.
Yeah, I completely agree with Joanne. So I would just add that our institutions have worked together since they were started. I mean, it's not that that's new, but I think what we've been trying to do is be more intentional about it. And I mean, actually, I think that's the work of Kumu, to try to get us all to be more intentional about the work that we do to engage with our communities. And so it has been really fun to work together. We were benefited by the fact, so I've known Joanne for 20 years, and every major decision I had to make, I asked her for her advice. So, and I always listened to her. And I've known Mike for 10 years because we worked together. And actually, Brian was the newbie. Exactly. And he's already moved on, yeah. but it was a pleasure getting to know him. So it was just easier for us to collaborate personally because we know and trust each other.
And also one of the things, can you hear me?
Yep.
That we value, I guess, across the institutions is the fact that we are, in this great region, Greater Philadelphia. We have a very diverse population of citizens, students, professionals, and despite the fact that we're across the river from the Delaware, I mean, we share the same issues, right? In terms of health disparities, homelessness, but also good things, right? The fact that we are actually helping transform the communities that we are in. And so one of the things that I value the most is actually hearing from my colleagues across the river, because despite the fact that Rutgers-Camden has been there for quite some time, I mean, it's only now that we are really getting engaged with the institutions across the river. And thanks to our Chancellor Phoebe Haddon, who's been a champion of this, and also members of our leadership team. Naima Watson is here. She took over the role of Associate Chancellor for Civic Engagement from Andrew Seligson, who's also here, which was started when Wendell was our chancellor, way back when. So I've worked with Wendell as well when I was interim dean of arts and sciences, and fast forward 10 years, and we're still working together, and that's great.
Well, each of your institutions are located in different parts of the greater Philadelphia area, but with great proximity to the city. I mean, Rutgers may even be a little bit closer than Temple from where we are this minute. Talk about how the mission, the urban mission, that's today's topic, is articulated and expressed in each of your institutions, and what part of that portfolio or mission sort of sits in the office of the provost, and a little bit about how it's articulated and how it's organized. Michael?
You want to start, Mike?
Yeah, I can start. So we are 5 years into our strategic plan, and if you can download our strategic plan from the website. But civic engagement is one of our strategic priorities on campus. I mean, it's there, but not only that, it permeates everything that we do. So, I mean, and I'll talk more about this specifically, but the way we engage our faculty, students, and even staff in the work that we do in the community is primarily through an office that we established 10 years ago. It's celebrating its 10th year anniversary this year, the Office of Civic Engagement. And it's headed by, a member of our leadership team, our Associate Chancellor for Civic Engagement, Naima Watson. And it connects the work of our faculty and students to the community that we are in. And so there are many programs that they run within the office, but it also involves a lot of people. I mean, the office is fully staffed. 9 staff members, a number of faculty fellows. We even have a faculty director for engaged learning and scholarship who makes sure that we connect our faculty not only in the teaching of service learning, but also valuing that the work that they do in the community. Publicly engaged scholarship is one of the things that we are actually trying to promote on our campus as well. And so I think, the work that the office does succeeds because our faculty and students engage, and they know that it's important work that we do. And I think it does come from the top, right? It's part of our strategic plan. Our chancellor makes sure that the programs are fully supported, but at the same time, there's grassroots buy-in to the work that the office does in the community.
So being a historian, I have to give the long view, and I'll do it quickly, but we don't brag about Ben Franklin, our founder, and so we've been here for a long, long time, and Penn has been a core part of the Philadelphia community from the beginning, and really was started to serve the Philadelphia community. And for almost 2 centuries, the majority of people who went to Penn were from Philadelphia and stayed in Philadelphia. And I think, so that's the first phase. The second phase, I think, started around World War II, a little bit after becoming a national institution. And I think that most people, well, Judy Roden wrote a history, and I think she said this, that the university got away from its focus on connection to Philadelphia, at least somewhat in the post-war period. And I think, the last phase started about 25 years ago, where the recognition that, and actually I think we became a global institution at that point. And I don't like slogans, but I think the slogan, think globally, act locally, is actually applicable in lots of cases, and it's true to Penn. So there was a recognition 25 years ago that those two things aren't in conflict, being a national institution. Actually, the way that you do that, the way that you train faculty and build great research and do all those things is in the local community, right? And so I think we had a recognition 25 years ago that those weren't in conflict. They were actually, they were reinforcing. And as I think about the work today at Penn, we have 26,000 students. We have 4,000 faculty. The numbers just flabbergasted me. We have a $12 billion annual budget. And so the impact that we have on the region is just immense. And the number of students that we have engaged is immense. And the number of faculty that we have doing work. So our challenge, again, I keep on coming back to this word intentional, is to try to be more intentional about the work. We can't, I was blessed to be able to go to Rutgers-Camden, where we could actually create an office of civic engagement. We're too big a place to have an office of civic engagement. We just have way too many faculty and staff and students that are doing that work. So we often describe ourselves as the central administration at Penn as a hub of a lot of spokes. And our job is to try to keep the things together. And that's a hard job, given how many people want to do this work. But that's really how I think about the work that we do at Penn.
I think Charles mentioned it earlier when he was doing the introductory remarks, but what you just heard and that I would want to reinforce is the importance of institutional leadership. And no matter what the form is, it's not going to succeed if the people at the top don't have this as a priority. And so I think that we're all really pleased to be able to identify people from our institutions that are here. Bill Bergman, who's our Vice President for Public Affairs, is here. Shirley Moy, who runs our Workforce Development Program, is here. And I think that reflects the kind of institutional commitment that Wendell was just talking about. It's organic, in a lot of ways, but it won't succeed if you don't have the kind of leadership at the top to prioritize this and make sure it has the resources. The problem is that unless you're a $12 billion enterprise, for the rest of us, everything involves choices. It's really funny. I just have to say, when I go over to Penn all the time, it is just so magnificently beautiful, and you can do a lot of admiring of it. But I'm really pleased to reinforce that it hasn't lost its way with all that it has going for it. And I think we can all be very appreciative of the work that gets done there, the work that gets done at Rutgers-Camden, the work that gets done at Temple. In a variety of ways, I view our responsibility as a two-way street. We are not merely taking in students, educating them and wishing them well and sending them off into the world. We are integral members of this urban community, and our presence here as employers, as hubs of access to provide opportunities for the people that are in your immediate footprint and beyond to take advantage of your presence. I think that's our job. Obviously, we are educating our students, but we have to simultaneously really never forget the impact that our presence has in making sure that we are not just good neighbors in the slogan way, but good neighbors to the people in this city so that they are better for the presence of these institutions.
To talk about in the advancing of this, of this mission, what are some of the countervailing pressures? Michael alluded to efforts to give credit for some of the scholarship being done. You both alluded to resources. We know that within a university environment, there's always competitions for every type of resource. How do you navigate the role of prioritizing, allocating, sort of juggling those competing pressures for time and attention within a university where credit for the work is often not necessarily aligned with the success of the community around you?
Yeah, I do think that's a challenge for all of our institutions, and it's different. And so I opened the door for Joanne to tease me about our budget. But even with the resources that we have, and we're blessed, you still have to make choices. You still have to set priorities. And they are hard to set when you really have thousands of people who have passions that they want to follow. And so, I think our focus is to try to channel on a small number of things, and you're going to hopefully come see Pennovation this afternoon, and that our role as an economic anchor in the city and region has been a priority for Penn. And I think there's still lots of work to do, but we're very proud of what's happening down there, and also on Market Street, working with the Science Center and other places to really have a big impact. So that's one priority. A second one is working with the public schools, and this was started when you were chief of staff, and then we had the challenge of working together on the School Reform Commission and figuring out how to really support public education in the city and the region, again, is a real priority. And of course, we have a wonderful graduate school of education, but that work happens in every single one of our 12 schools supporting public education. So figuring out how to do it, again, more intentionally. And I guess the last thing I'd say is figuring out, and this I think is the biggest challenge, figuring out how to measure the impact of what we do. And I think that's probably a third of the sessions at Kumu typically. How do we measure the impact and then replicate what we're doing? And I guess I'll add one more thing. After we replicate, how do we actually roll back things that really aren't that good, aren't that successful, right? That's probably the hardest thing for all of us at institutions to say, oh, that really didn't work. Let's wrap that up and move on to something more important. Right? That's really hard work to do too.
So I echo what Wendell said. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, you have limited resources. We're not like Penn, but there are things that you must do. And so there are initiatives that we make sure is funded because it's just very important to us. An example is engaged civic learning, which really permeates our campus. Our students actually do engage civic learning because it's part of their gen ed curriculum. They are required to take at least one engaged civic learning course. And it takes a lot of hard work to create these partnerships with our partners in Camden. They're nonprofits, they're healthcare organizations, and you want to make sure that you sustain those partnerships. So you must continue that effort. But like Wendell said, there are some things that you may be not able to do this year because there's not enough resources. But one of the things that our office has been able to do is very entrepreneurial. I mean, Naeem has been writing grants all over the place, getting funding from foundations. So that's one of the things that we do as well. Promote the work that we do and get buy-in from foundations who value the work that's being done. And of course, you got to have to sell that. And you have to make sure that you produce outcomes and show that it works, that it impacts the community. So, I mean, you do things. You got to have to think outside of the box in order to do the kinds of things that you value the most, given the limited resources that you have.
Joanne, what's a day in the life? What's a day in your life as provost at Temple University, and 2 miles north of here on North Broad Street in North Philadelphia? How do these countervailing pressures and all that? How's it sort of just play out day to day? What's your day? What are the types of days look like?
They're not that exciting to watch. So when people say, for instance, can a young person follow me around, I often say, so here's my day. I'm in a meeting. I'm doing email. I'm in a meeting. I'm doing email. It's not that exciting to watch, but it is being, as many of us are in these roles, pretty close to the top of the leadership. It gives you a voice and an ear for things, and I think that's really the important part of the day. So every day is different. As the executive vice president and provost, and I have to say, when I got the job, I thought they were redundant. They're not exactly. The provost is the academic part. The executive vice president is almost all of the student piece except athletics. So there is a footprint of the university that trickles up to me in a variety of ways. And so that's everything from admissions and recruitment to tenure and promotion of faculty. And so a typical day is being asked to provide our judgment, I think this would be true for all of us, into the institutional decisions that you've just heard we all have to make. We all have to face choices, and we all have to assign priorities. And so having an ability to contribute to that is the part that I'm actually most proud of in terms of having arrived at this level. I was the dean of the law school before this job, and that was a great job. And I miss aspects of it, but I remember one of our earlier presidents saying to me as a law school dean, well, you're pretty far down the food chain. I'm like, I'm a dean. But in a way, it's true, that you get to this upper level where you're talking to the vice presidents and really feeling like you have the ability to shape decisions. And so that is a tremendous responsibility, but it's the thing that the day is made up of that I feel really proud about.
Are those peer relationships ever, I guess I shouldn't say if, when are those peer relationships sort of in tension as you sort of go about doing this work? Close friends of Bill Bergman here, and these, as you sort of navigate sort of these peer relationships within the institution, as you're seeking to advance this work, how do those, what advice would you give to how you sort of do that sort of horizontal managing of relationships at the leadership level of an institution?
Did you want me to follow up on that?
Yeah.
So I think the first thing, Pedro, in answering that is to be a little self-aware of your strengths and your non-strengths and the way in which you lead. Our current president, Dick Englert, is fond of saying you can't lead by authority, you have to lead by persuasion, and I think that's absolutely true. So when I think about these kinds of decisions, not everybody's going to agree with every decision we make, but if it is well thought out and you explain yourself, mostly people will respect that. They will know that you're not crazy, that you're not self-aggrandizing, that you're not I can't favor the law school because that's where I came from. I am now a university officer. And so I think that the advice that I would give to people is to learn a little bit about your style and then realize don't take all of this too seriously. When somebody disagrees with you and tries to sort of hold you back, it might be because they actually think that's the right decision for them to make. And if you don't take it personally, you can continue to engage and maybe win them over. So I think it's a personal thing.
So, Wendell, I saw Ira Harkavy down here. I know was doing work at Center at Penn, involved in civic engagement a long time ago. Started off by taking over buildings. I think he still does that. And at the same time, you've got a sort of a collection of senior administrators within the university. You said it's an enormous amount of work, sort of divided. And you mentioned earlier the academic centers through the and colleges within the university, but the work has also been distributed through administration and different functions within administration, procurement, hiring. You guys track a whole lot of things as to community impact. Is it just a well-oiled machine at this point, or what? How are the issues that sort of percolate that where you have to sort of navigate these different elements play out differently now than they might have in the past?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate you giving a shout out to Ira, and I will reinforce it. So Ira runs our Netter Center, which really is a global leader, thinker in this work, and it's just a pleasure to work with him. Actually, my first experience with civic engagement was teaching a class at the Netter Center 25 years ago. And Ira is brilliant at many things, but he is brilliant at being a hub, but being collaborative, right? So because we're so big that he knows that we can't manage everything that we do through the Netter Center, but the Netter Center has its fingers in everything that we do. And I think that's the right way to approach it. My reflection, I completely agree with Joanne that our jobs aren't interesting to shadow. I spend my day in my office. I have 27 people that report to me. I spend my day in my office greeting the 27 people that report to me. That's what I do. And helping them do their jobs. And I completely also agree with Joanne that you have to approach the work as a servant leader, helping other people do their jobs. Like my job is to help other people do their jobs. That's what I do. And so how do you manage those tensions that you mentioned? So we're blessed in lots of ways. One, because we have a long-standing history, we really are attracting leaders at this point who are coming, and students and faculty, by the way, who are coming to Penn because we're known as a place that does really engaged work. So there isn't anybody in the senior leadership that doesn't get it. Now, again, there are priorities. There are people that have different ideas of how they want to do this work, but there really isn't anybody who needs convincing about the importance of measuring our impact in a positive way on the city and the region. So again, a lot of the work is just setting priorities and saying, all right, yeah, we can do these 3 things, but we can't do those 7. And then also making sure as much as possible in a very large place that the schools are working together. So we have amazing collaborations. One, which I'll brag about quickly, is the Graduate School of Education, the School of Social Policy and Practice, and the School of Nursing have started this project called Philadelphia Futures. And it's an intentional project to those 3 schools to work together to help youth development in the city of Philadelphia. And they have a bunch of things that they do. One of the ones I'm particularly proud of is at Kensington Health Sciences Academy in North Philadelphia. And they have students and faculty there providing resources to that school, which is in a pretty challenged neighborhood. And so it's having a big impact. So there are, because the school district doesn't have as much money as it should, we don't have enough counselors, we don't have enough nurses, so how do we do it? Well, there are student nurses at Kensington Health Sciences. There are student counselors at Kensington Health Sciences, right? And they're supervised and coordinated, and they work with the principal. And then just the last thing I'll say about this, and the reason why it's so great is that it was the dean's recognition that that's in their self-interest also, right? So if you're a nurse, what do? You work with social workers all the time. Right? If you're a social worker, you work with teachers all the time, right? I mean, the students who are getting degrees in social work or education or nursing need to have interprofessional collaboration. That's a core part of the work, right? So it's completely in the school's self-interest to do that kind of work to train the best students, right? But I do think it took a little time to realize that kind of thing. But at this point, I wouldn't describe this as a well-oiled machine, but I do think that's a good example of how that didn't come from the top. It came from the deans and the schools deciding that this was in their interest to work together.
Michael, you were mentioning before we got started the relatively new School of Nursing and the role that that's playing in the Camden and regional community. How has that sort of fit in? How has that fit into the work that you're doing? Was it purely just responding to market, to market demand from a workforce side, or how did you see it in the context of sort of advancing the urban mission of
nursing at Rutgers-Camden has a very interesting history because it used to be a department within the College of Arts and Sciences. So at the time that I was interim dean of Arts and Sciences, it was one of the departments in Arts and Sciences. So, but it has been a nursing program for a long time. I mean, it's an integral part of the university. But at some point, and Wendell knows the story, I mean, we felt that there's a need to make this a standalone school because not only of the demand from students who want to be nurses, but also the promise of what it can do for the community. And so when it became a school and we then eventually hired, our dean of the School of Nursing, he's right here, Dean Donna Nikitas. It flourished. I mean, there's a lot of things that it's doing now that we were not able to do, not only because it grew in size, but also, in fact, the mentality of the faculty are there very different. There's a lot of faculty there that's actually already doing work in the community. I mean, they have, in fact, recently created a health clinic in one of the new villages, condominiums in Camden, the Branch Village project. And they are helping, people there who do not have access to health care by being there, right there in the facility. And they're connecting with other health partners in the Camden area. That kind of work is really something that, came from the leadership of the nursing school, but also supported by the campus as a whole. Because, as I said previously, I mean, we value the work that we do in the community. That's really part of our DNA. And that's not only true with the School of Nursing, it's true with Arts and Sciences as well in other schools. So one of the things that I do as provost is really try to connect the work that all of these schools do. I mean, there's a lot of collaborations among the schools. It's not only in terms of, the common work that they do in these initiatives like civic engagement, but they also create interdisciplinary programs. I mean, there's a partnership, for example, between nursing and arts and sciences and health sciences. Business is also partnered with nursing by creating a dual degree in DNP and MBA. You can actually finish DNP and MBA, save a couple of years getting both degrees. And so this kind of program is, very, it's an attractive program for those who want to be in health administration, for example. The medical school has partnered with community health partners in Camden for a medical legal partnership program. So all of this work is something that, I value a lot because not only do I help the schools, I learn a lot from what they do. I mean, I'm a computer scientist. I mean, prior to taking this role, I'm a very narrow focus, and my area, parallel and distributed computing. But I can say now I know a lot about what, civic engagement is all about, what nursing does, what's important in health, and the kinds of problems that we see in the community. And so I think it's a learning experience for me as well. Like Wendell said, I'm there to serve our academic deans. But at the same time, one of the things that makes, I guess, Rutgers University-Camden different from Temple and Penn is that I work with the other campus provosts as well. I mean, there are other provosts at Rutgers. There's a provost in Newark and in New Brunswick, and there's also, in fact, 2 provosts in RBHS, that's Rutgers Biomedical Health Sciences. And there are very different issues that we deal with. But I think one of the things that we find comfort in is that we actually value the work that we do. And it's the work of the faculty, the students that we have, and making sure that they value that experience that they go through at Rutgers. And we share ideas as well. I mean, I learn a lot from the other provosts. In the same time, I think help them understand, the unique features of our campus at Rutgers-Camden. Because despite the fact that we're small, we're doing great things there in our little campus. I think in many ways we actually are at the forefront of some of the things that we do that other campuses are not able to do because they're bigger ships. We can easily maneuver a small campus. We can do things fairly quickly as a campus.
Maybe sticking with you, Mike, talk about the reaction of community, neighbors, local government officials to the work that you do. In what ways do you think that work is appreciated? In what ways do you think some of that work is sort of more off the radar than you like, or talk about sort of the reaction of sort of community, both neighborhood residents as well as government officials, to the extraordinary work that each of your institutions are doing.
Well, I think the work that we do is valued because we're not the only ones doing it in Camden. We have companies that recently moved, American Water, for example, Holtec, Michael's organization. They're also involved in the community. So they're part of Phoebe Haddon here is on the board of Cooper's Ferry, which is the consortium of companies that recently moved in Camden. And that's what they do. They think about what we can do for the city. And so it's not only us doing the work. We have partners, and we work with them. We don't work in isolation, really. We work with them to do kinds of things that we do. And so that's the external part. We partner with not only, the companies that move there, but with community health organizations. That Camden Coalition of Healthcare Providers is one of our big partners. The School of Nursing has worked with them. The Walter Rand Institute has worked with them. The Walter Rand Institute actually did the community health needs assessment, in partnership with the Camden Coalition to address issues about health disparities in the southern counties of southern New Jersey. And so there's a lot of work that we do that is in partnership already. So it's not that we need to sell it, right? But at the same time, we want to make sure that we hear the voices of our residents. And so, Naima always has this community partners symposium every year where we bring our community partners, we bring the residents of Camden to talk about the work that we do, whether they're useful, whether there's something that we need to do better, where there's something that we should not be doing anymore. So we gain feedback as well from everybody that we worked with.
You want me to ask some questions? So Mike answered that beautifully, and so I don't want to just repeat the things that he just said because we take a similar approach, but let me just add a couple things. So first of all, in our prep, when we talked last week, I said that I was going to say the following thing to this question, which is my mother always told me, a job well done is its own reward. A job well done is its own reward. And I say that frequently to my team and myself, right? It's important to remember.
You say that to the legislative team?
No, but it's true, and I do think we have to remember that. So I think the real challenge. We do, I think, very good work. We do get a bunch of credit for it. People constantly say, because we have so many resources, that, well, Penn needs to do more. And my answer is always the same. You're right. What do you think that should be? But I come back again to this question about how do we measure the impact, and how do we actually show that the work that we're doing is having an impact in positive ways for people who live in our communities, right? That's why we're constantly trying to do that, to get numbers and also qualitative impact. And I guess the last thing I'd add, and Charles and I were talking about this last night, this is a challenge always, but particularly true today, instant gratification, right? So this work is long run. So I was saying to Charles, like and this is about Rutgers-Camden, but I think it applies very well to Penn and Temple. The investments that Annie Casey made 25 years ago in Camden are now having an impact, and it's really positive. But that's what it takes. 15, 25 years to do these things. And we just have to remember that constantly, and also celebrate that so that's why I want to give a shout out to Annie and Casey. I mean, it was a big deal, the investments that they made 25 years ago, that they made the investment in Rutgers-Camden 10 years ago to create the Office of Civic Engagement. We couldn't have done it without them, right? And now we're seeing the impact. And this work is it's long run, right? We just have to remember that constantly.
I see Lori Jones over there, also from Rutgers. We work together in the city government, and there was a time of year, usually in the spring, where Temple University Health System would visit, and the theme was always the same. By far, the health system had provided more uncompensated care than any other medical provider in the city by virtue of community and also the level of specialized care it would provide. And it was a system that is sort of perennially also strained, but by virtue of where it is and its mission, kind of keeps, really sort of kept on giving. And the reason they'd come in is we, at the end of every year, try to figure out whether there were unspent funds where we, despite everything, Medicaid, where Medicaid dollars were short, whether there were any unspent funds in our public health budget that could be a drop in the bucket for what Temple had just lost in terms of uncompensated care. And it's a very serious tension in terms of mission and sustainability there, and sort of not, you don't appreciate things until, we've had recent health closure in the city with Hahnemann. You don't sort of appreciate what institutions are doing until, they're no longer doing it anymore. So, Temple in many ways, experiences this in lots of the fields in which it's working. So, Joanne, how do you, we were sort of joking the other day. How do you get enough credit for that kind of work, or what would you share about doing this work and how deep it takes you and the ability to simultaneously be able to let people know that it doesn't happen by magic?
Philadelphia is the largest city in the United States that doesn't have a public hospital, and for all intents and purposes, Temple University's health system is that public hospital, and the figure to which you just alluded last year was $70 million. And that's a lot of money. But at the same time, there isn't a soul that I've ever heard suggest that we should do anything other than that. But it is a struggle in order to provide that kind of support, both at the immediate level in the emergency room and the highly sophisticated levels in which we are offering healthcare support in this region. But it is an interesting tension, because I think your question about how do we get the credit, I'm like, we're not. We try to tell that story in publications and in speeches, but the reality is people are like, yeah, of course I'm supposed to be able to walk into the emergency room and get care. And did I forget to say thank you? Oh, sorry. So it is difficult, but it is in the institution's DNA to do that. We are constantly, and thank you for your efforts to try at the end of a fiscal year to find the leftover Medicaid dollars or whatever that might help stem the tide a little bit. But it is a challenge, and I think, interestingly, it is exacerbated a bit by the concerns about gentrification that are happening in cities as institutions grow and continue to do good work. There is a building that now looks like it's a university building that used to look like a residence, and so you have that struggle. And I think, interestingly, we are really making an effort on our part. We've just created a North Central Services district in order to try in one additional way, and the list could go on, to be good neighbors to the people who are impacted by the fact that there are many, many, many more students living in our footprint than was true 25 years ago. Interestingly, I often say, not all in Temple University buildings. I mean, there's a lot of private sector development going on for which we get blamed. But the reality is, either way, people perceive it to be an expansion of the university, and so they have to be reminded sometimes by our actions of our recognition of the impact that we are having, and wanting to make sure that our existence can be done well with our neighbors. And I just want to say one last thing. The other two people who are here that I can brag about, Dr. Tiffany Archney and Eileen Frierson, a member of our community, are here. And what I want to say about Dr. Archie is, to all of you who are thinking what you want to take back to your institutions, I want to remind you that at some level you need to teach your students and your faculty what we sit up here and know is true. But the reality is not every single human being arrives knowing that. And Dr. Archie runs our training program, and Eileen Frierson is a wonderful neighbor, helping us make sure that we walk the walk of the talk that we try to talk.
And as we sort of wrap up here, I want to go back to some comments you made in the beginning as to the four institutions that we mentioned sort of working together very naturally. The greater Philadelphia area, I forget what the number is, I think it was something like 90 colleges and universities within the sort of metro area. All extraordinary and fantastic institutions. And talked about the four institutions here working together. What aspirations do you have? I mean, about what more colleges and universities in an area could be doing together? As you spoke, it was interesting to me that over the last 20 years, interdisciplinary collaboration just seems to be a lot more normalized. Back then, 20-something years ago, I remember that being, a really difficult thing. And now it seems that while progress is being made there's increasing attention to what are these external collaborations that, that could or should be happening. Talk about, what you think could happen in this area through even broader collaboration among the colleges and universities and peers, to the extent it's okay.
Yeah. So we've talked about what we do within our institution in terms of engaging with the community. I think I would like to see our institutions working together on common projects and bring to bear, the things that we do. Learn from each other. The Law Enforcement and Public Health Conference that we're bringing here in 2021 is a good start, because that will not only bring a lot of public health scholars and law enforcement practitioners here. That's a huge conference, by the way. It's an international conference. This year's being held in Edinburgh. Last year was in Toronto, so we're bringing that huge conference here. But that's a place where we can actually talk about the work that we do in that space and maybe identify a project that we can do together as opposed to be in isolation. Because bringing together resources that we have in the four institutions, of course, we're smaller than you, but we can bring some things as well, will allow us to do something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Right? We don't need to duplicate certain things. We can partner to do and bring to bear the resource that we have together. So that's one thing. You might want to start small in that space of public health, that will have an impact not only in the community but the greater Philadelphia region. I would like also to see maybe other institutions to be involved in what we're doing. We are the four institutions that started this, but I know that other institutions might be interested, right, in joining it, maybe in the conference that we're bringing here as well.
Well, starting very big picture, I think the answer is there isn't anything we shouldn't be collaborating on. And just a quick reflection, so the provosts of the Ivy League and some other universities get together every semester for a couple of days to talk about common issues. And it's been now 5 meetings for me, and it's been really heartening to hear that we're constantly talking about collaborating there too. I mean, we have just literally dozens of fundamental challenges in our society and the world, right? And we should be collaborating on all of them. None of us can solve any of these problems on their own, right? So we should just be approaching the work, all of us, constantly about who are the other partners that we can do this work better with. And again, I do think that that's, so let me give another shout out to Kumu. I mean, that's why Kumu exists, right? And the fact that this group is twice as large as it was a decade ago says a bunch about our recognition that we have to work more together. So that's really a big picture. I do think in terms of our collaboration and with other universities in the region, and I think this is true again across the country, as I think about health, public health, economic development, and education. And education obviously is what we do, but I really mean collaboration with public education in the city and the region. We have to do all three of those things. There's no way this region is going to flourish if we're not collaborating on those things. And those aren't the only things. Again, we should be collaborating on everything. But as I think about the priorities, I think those are the things that we should be doing.
I couldn't agree more, and I do think, as Michael said, that the Law Enforcement and Public Health Conference is the first of this, because we are partnering. Our four institutions were the lead sponsors, but the city has now stepped in. So I think this is going to be an example of how we can come together and create something that is good for all of us. I know that also when Wendell and I first talked about this, he talked about being a hub of business training, so that businesses would think of this region as a place where they were going to be able to come and get good educated workers. We haven't pulled it off yet, but I think that might be the next thing that we try to do, to make sure that we are stepping out of our competitive roles of who gets the psychology teacher and thinks about the fact that, at least as far as I'm concerned, 50 years from now, these four institutions will still be here. And so we owe it to our institutions, but more we owe it to this region to think about the ways in which we can step out of our competitive areas. And as Wendell and Michael have said, think about the ways in which we can collaborate. And I will also say that it will be long after I'm gone, but I honestly think that there will come a time when we're even doing more educational collaboration. You know, when I was the dean of the law school, I was thinking, for example, we don't all need a sports law program. Maybe there's a Philadelphia sports law program that's housed at Rutgers-Camden and some other program that's housed at Temple. It's right across the river. And I think that is the kind of thing that educational institutions historically have never done. We're probably not quite ready to do that now, but if we begin with some of these other initiatives that get us used to working together, I think that's what the future is going to be, and that's only going to be good for the region.
It's a terrific place to end. Thank you very much, Joanne Epps, Wendell Pritchett, Michael Palis.